Former Captain Kangaroo host, now Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, was on CNBC, I should say, talking about the debt ceiling. And she offered this unintentional tell about the real perspective of the Biden administration. We knew this, but it's always nice to have the Treasury Secretary say it.
And the proposals that they've set out would entail draconian cuts and really end the policies we've put in place to invest in our economy in clean energy.
Ah, there it is. We want to continue our profligate spending because we got this backdoor Green New Deal we passed, and John Podesta is ready to go to hand out $300 billion of funny money to preferred green energy companies as we pursue our continued policy of energy dependence on America's enemies. Nice tell. Thank you. The cover story, of course, is the draconian cuts, and she dutifully repeated the talking points of the administration. Such did KJP, the White House spokeswoman, when she was pressed by Fox News' Jackie Heinrich on the matter. This is KJP.
43 Republican senators signed onto a letter opposing raising the debt ceiling without budget reforms, and 217 members in the House voted for that bill to raise the debt limit with cuts to spending. Does the White House consider all of those members to be dangerous MAGA Republican extremists?
Do they understand what the cuts that they're voting for is going to do? That's the question. I mean, Republicans in Congress, in the House specifically, voted for cuts that's going to hurt American families. I mean, we can't say this enough. 22% cuts to veterans, healthcare, schools. That's what they voted for.
They can't say that enough because it's the lie that they're going with. Kevin McCarthy, fresh out of his meeting with the big guy, Mr. 10%, President Biden, addressed that propaganda directly.
First of all, cutting the veterans is a lie. Where in the bill does it say we cut veterans? You'll find next week when we do our appropriation bill, we increase the funding to veterans. But this is what I'm talking about. That type of behavior is pure political rhetoric. This is too important issue to play political games with. So if one side's going to sit back and say those type of things, all I'm asking is that we spend the amount of money we spent 5 months ago. Were veterans getting their care 5 months ago? We're actually going to increase. And how the system works, it's just like any other household. You get a certain amount of income in, then you prioritize how you spend it. In our appropriation process, Republicans and Democrats alike will get to sit in committee and decide how much to spend. The difference is that we'll spend what we spent 5 months ago, and we can decide what our priorities.
Spend what we spent 5 months ago. Threat to our democracy. Threat to our democracy. Draconian cuts. McCarthy went on to provide a general characterization of his meeting with the big guy, Mr. 10%, President Biden. He asked for anything the president would be willing to spend at the levels we were spending 5 months ago, and nothing was forthcoming.
Well, I asked him numerous times, are there some places we could find savings? He wouldn't give me any, so I'm hopeful that we'll be able to find them. You can't spend more money, which his budget does, than the pandemic. They added $6 trillion when they're in the majority, and what happened? We got inflation. We hurt every family in America. I think the best thing we could do is find places that we can eliminate waste, find places that we can grow this economy, and that's exactly what the House bill does.
And, again, as we talked to Dr. Joel Zinberg at the end of the show yesterday, per his piece in the Journal, you're talking about almost $500 billion in unspent COVID funds. Why can't we claw those back? And that question isn't asked, and no answer is forthcoming from Biden, Inc. For more on this, please be joined by Steve Moore, economist and author of Govzilla. Steve, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hey, Dan, good to be with you. I think maybe Janet Yellen and Joe Biden must have gone to Evanston High School and never learned math. Maybe that's the problem.
Yeah, maybe. KJP, what can we say about her? No progress yesterday, according to McCarthy. Yeah. They're meeting again on Friday. Give us your take on where things sit.
Look, Kevin McCarthy is a hero here, and I don't always say that about him, but he was able to get here's the thing. The Democrats made a calculus at the beginning of the year that they didn't think that Kevin McCarthy would be able to get 218 votes for anything on the debt. And he did. And by the way, I just want to remind your listeners that that bill that passed the House of Representatives with 220 votes, every Republican, but I think two voted for it, not a single Democrat voted for it, to raise the debt ceiling. That raises the debt ceiling. The Armageddon that Biden and Janet Yellen have been talking about would be removed with that bill. Now, it's in the Senate right now. Last time I checked, Dan, that the Senate is controlled by Chucky Schumer and the Democrats. They haven't passed anything. Why isn't Joe Biden going after the Democrats in the Senate saying, pass a bill? Anything. So I think that the Republicans should be just sitting back and saying, show me something. They made a huge miscalculation. McCarthy is exactly right that this path that we're on with debt and out-of-control government spending is going to destroy our country's economy. I think everybody knows that, whether you're a Democrat or Republican. We can't continue on a path where Biden has added $6 trillion in debt in 2 years. And incidentally, in just the numbers just came out a couple of days ago, in just the first 6 months of this year, Dan, we borrowed $1.1 trillion in 6 months. This is an insane path. And for Biden to say everything's just fine, just raise the debt ceiling, give me an unlimited credit card, is really an outrageous statement and an outrageous position. And Republicans should not move 1 inch in his direction until Biden comes up with a real plan.
Well, and there's a couple of reasons why they should hold fast, too. Political ones. One is the president has never been weaker per his approval rating in the mid-30s.
True. Yes.
And number two, with respect to where things stand, if things break bad, ultimately the American people are inclined to blame the president. So in going into 2024, if we're in a stagflationary environment, if we're in a recession, he can try to blame, one half of one of the chambers in Congress all he wants, but the people hold the president accountable for how things are going economically.
So, that's the irony of this. By the way, my friend Jeff Yast, who's one of the top financial people in the country, has basically put out a report saying if Biden were to sign this Republican plan, that the stock market would go up by $2 trillion. And so you'd see a boomlet in the economy if Biden just said, okay, I'll go along with this. By the way, that's what Bill Clinton did. That's how he got reelected, right? Remember, he basically made these deals with Republicans. So here's the thing about Biden and the people in the White House. They're so radically left-wing ideological, they can't even do the things that are in their own political interest. If Biden did what is in his own interest to get reelected, he would sign this bill. Right now, he's got this hissy fit. He's acting like a 12-year-old girl. I'm not going to negotiate, and that's that. And look, Republicans just sit back and say, we passed the debt ceiling bill. When Janet Yellen keeps running around the country saying, Republicans have to pass the debt ceiling bill, they have. They've done it. It's out there. It's the only game in town.
Well, the other thing, too, is, his base might start to get a little bit jumpy, too. You see home prices fell in a third of U.S. markets during the first quarter of this year, and they fell the most in urban centers. Like San Francisco was off 14% year over year in median home prices, right? So those urban centers that are the base of the Democrat Socialist Party and Biden's base, they may not be real enthusiastic about coming out to vote to reelect Joe Biden.
Well, look, Biden has his own political problems, but on the economic consequences of this, I'm here to tell your listeners, this is not some kind of fire drill. This is the real thing. This is an emergency we have with our economy and the massive amounts of debt and spending. And, look, I'm just going to quickly go down the list and ask people, to think about this. Do you think these are reasonable demands? Number one, a 1% cap on the increase in government spending. There are cuts. There are cuts, Dan. It's a 1% increase in spending.
And by the way, that's something that Joe Manchin agrees with.
Yeah, exactly. And by the way, every time I've been involved in these fights for 35 years, I came to Washington in the Reagan years. Every single time Republicans try to cut some spending out of the budget. Oh my God, veterans are going to lose their benefits. Social Security recipients are going to be thrown out the streets. Kittens will die. If we do this, I mean, the rhetoric is so overheated. You'd think they were taking a chainsaw to the budget, which they should be doing. So 1% cap on spending, which is very reasonable. Number two, get back to drilling American oil and gas, which will raise revenue for the government. I think everybody agrees that's a smart thing. Number three, we're not going to give $150 billion out to student loan, people who didn't pay their student loans. That's a stupid idea. Number four, we're not going to hire 87,000 new IRS agents. There, I just saved $50 billion. Number five, you mentioned this one. Let's just not spend the $500 billion unspent COVID money. Don't treat that like a piggy bank. Let's use that money to reduce the amount of the debt. And the other one that I think is really an important one is work requirements for welfare. Everybody, 80% of Americans are in favor of that. So there's nothing in this plan that is unreasonable. In fact, Dan, I think you and I would probably say, hey, this is way too much spending. I would cut every government program by 10%. I'm with Rand Paul. You want to balance the budget? It's so simple. You just go back to pre-COVID 2019 levels of spending, we'd have a balanced budget. Is that so hard?
Right. That's extremist. It's a threat to our democracy. Right. That's all they have. They can't address the merits, so they have to demagogue the issue with their refrigerator magnet phraseology. No, that's right. But what is your take though on the underlying precariousness of the economy? Because Steve Schwartzman, the billionaire founder of Blackstone, he seems to think that things are not as bad as we're led to believe. I know he's sort of a perma bear, but he says, look, commercial real estate is a problem, but a lot of these banks also have a balanced portfolio when it comes to real estate that includes a lot of industrial properties that are actually doing pretty well. And so there's not necessarily you want to wait to see in terms of getting back into the market or where things go. You want to wait to see how this debt ceiling plays out and so on and so forth. But generally speaking, there's no reason why we shouldn't see the market tick up for the rest of this year. There's no reason why we necessarily have to go into a prolonged recession based on sort of the underlying state of affairs within the banking sector and the real estate sector and elsewhere.
Well, this economy has held up pretty resiliently. It's growing slowly, and we've only grown at a rate of like 1.5% now for the last 6 quarters. We should be growing, coming out of the COVID crisis, we should be growing at about 3 or 4%. So we're leaving a lot of money out of the system because we're just not doing the right things. My line on this is I do believe if we stay on this course that we're on right now with federal budget policy and the massive spending and borrowing, there will be a financial crisis. And it's going to happen. I don't know if it's going to happen in 3 months or 3 years or 2 years, but you can't. This is the Titanic headed to the iceberg. It's that simple. And you've got to turn this thing around. And this is a small step forward the Republicans have taken to say, look, we're not going to borrow. Right now, we're borrowing $2 trillion a year. I mean, when I first came to Washington, the entire national debt was $2 trillion. Now we're borrowing that much every single year. So I think everybody realizes what we're doing is wrong, morally and financially, and it has to. And look, the government has to be cut. The government is so out of control. And why can't we just get rid of the $300 billion for green energy? That hasn't accomplished anything. It's just all that money is just going to go to groups like the Sierra Club and stuff. That's not going to change the temperature of the planet, Dan.
He is Steve Moore, economist, author of Govzilla. Steve, thanks as always. Appreciate it.
Okay, Dan, have a great week. Take care.
You too. He joined us on the Turnkey.Pro answer line.
The more you listen, the more you'll know. This is Chicago's Morning Answer. Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Signature Bank is Chicago's fastest growing independently owned business bank. It's a bank that cares about your business and is invested in your success. I'm Dan Proft, and I know this because Signature Bank is my business bank.
Hi, I'm Chris Johnson, CEO of Classic Cinemas and proud customer of Signature Bank. We are a local family-owned business that is known for free refills on all sizes of popcorn, soft drinks, and ices. With over 9,000 heated recliners in 16 locations, we marry the traditions of the past with today's state-of-the-art technology. Throw in a 30-minute guarantee and an after-movie mint, and you have the